We can go. Can we do something like this? Like, how much of that do you get?
His beer's gonna go flying.
This is
You
where
get the whole
goes.
thing?
It's going to happen.
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
boom.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's how we smash
There is
it.
going to be beer.
Okay. Let's go. Welcome back. Wing It Podcast, goosedigital.com. Who do we have?
Robin Kroll.
Kevin Butler.
Chris O'Neill.
Michael Turksani. All right. Hey, guys.
Hey, Mike.
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Cincinnati, WKRP. Is that how that?
Oh, yeah. That's
Remember that?
Haven't thought of that for years.
Right?
That's a good one.
Yeah. Cincinnati's nicely upticked in the last few years. They've got a waterfront now. They have a Starbucks. No, there's a couple. There's like 2 or 3. It was hard to find, though.
Is
Not
that
gonna
like
lie.
to me, I think that's a bit of a downtick of Starbucks, but that's personal.
Wow. Oh, yeah. That's modern.
Should we go there?
Corporate America.
There goes
Yeah.
the podcast.
Uh-oh. Yeah, let's switch it then.
Starbucks will never sponsor us now, that's for sure. Sorry.
No, we were at the Vertifor conference. A little plug for that. That was good. Big user conference. We'll get a blog out on that. And interestingly, it sort of sparked the idea for this podcast, which was how to drive performance in your digital programs once you've crested over your kind of strategic implementation. Once you've made it a plan, and you've said we are going to put a strategic approach in place. 18 months later, however long that takes for you to sort of begin to plateau in your programs, is being able to really drive performance. And then so we thought, hey, let's talk about that. We don't usually talk about that.
Okay.
So we, Goose Digital, we often go after clients that are in their first throes of a strategic program.
Their specialty.
They've probably done a lot of things, little things, or they've probably put ad dollars towards things and websites up and various programs on a one-off basis. We help them pull all that together and build a plan and a strategy that's aligned with a budget and a timeline. And what we see is that typically, if you're not taking a strategic approach and you've been firing on a bunch of cylinders, probably why you're looking to go to that approach is you're not getting the best results of your activities, right?
Yep.
Probably sitting around in this digital beginner phase where spending lots of money, not seeing the returns, maybe even getting a bit frustrated, thinking you'd already kind of be somewhere, and then we come in, help them implement something, get these campaigns rolling, and even at a small scale of a test budget, can see some significant ROI to how that would go. But invariably, after a period of time, you've kind of maxed out that existing level of traction that a business may have. Let's just call it maybe even, traffic to your website. Maybe you always have 10,000 visitors to your website. Now our digital programs are converting those and more. But now you need more traffic. Now you need to go beyond the walls of your existing program. So how do we think about that? We sort of broke it down to really the importance of aligning with the business, because there's not a one size fits all approach to these campaigns. You really do need to understand the corporate strategy and the product strategy, data and insights, and kind of this, what we're calling this relentless pursuit, or this kind of drive to always be going after incremental gains.
Obsession.
Tied to that would be a bit of a roadmap as to even as granular as tactics required to do that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But, we talk a lot about marketing and how it's a really strategic device within an organization, but does marketing fundamentally understand the industry, the landscape, all the things that go on in it, to really be able to make strategic recommendations like this is where we have to go as a business, new product or offerings or whatever, to support what that roadmap would be, so that it's not just little bumps here and there, but you can really make multi-year jumps.
Yeah, to me, that's aligning with the business, right? I mean, Robin, you do a lot of this in terms of the roadmap process at the beginning, but it's understanding how, what really is important to them and where are the opportunities within their business, after a 2-year point.
Yeah, it's actually, if we sort of backtrack to the initial opportunities, very often it's easy to actually pick up that low-hanging fruit, because things that you aren't doing, like not having a website that's performing. So you might think, okay, that's it. I'm going to have I'm going to build a brand new website, and it's optimized, and I've got great content, creative, and suddenly I go from 2,000 to 10,000 web visits, and you think, wow, I'm really growing. I'm doing a really, really great job. But actually, if you think, you've actually been missing 8,000 visitors that you just haven't been taking the opportunity for, right? So you're kind of catching up. So you lay all these foundations, now you're back to where you should be, where you should have been. And that's actually the more important and the more challenging thing to go take that next step, right? So how do you go from that to that next level, saying, now I'm out in the playing field. How do I continue to grow the business and refine and get more optimized and get more laser focused on what that growth is?
Yep.
And in order to do all of that, the basis of all that is the data. So how do you know you only had 2,000 visitors, then you're going to 10? What do you know the opportunities from the growth? What are all the other metrics that you should be looking at to know how to move that next step?
Yeah, I like that. I think the thing that we even walk into where somebody we would consider to be a digital beginner, because they've how did our friend from one of the leading WCMs put it? They've been substituting tech for strategy. So they've chosen a piece of this and a piece of that, trying to sort of get
Other way
something
around.
driven.
Substituting strategy for technology.
No. They've been using technology and think you're being strategic.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same
subs-
thing.
yeah,
So
same
they're
thing.
Point made.
Substituting
basically
something
they're doing
for
the wrong
something.
thing.
Doing the wrong thing. Basically doing the wrong
No, but
thing.
you're picking tech and assuming it's your
It's a
strategy.
strategy,
I think we know what you're saying.
And so once you've sort of been around that tree a few times, and then you realize, as Michael was getting at earlier, you've got to have some kind of a strategy to pull your tactics together. Then it's not a set and forget thing. It's not like buying a window or a door. You've got to revisit that and going back to the data, looking at and needing to be insightful enough about the data to be able to make your next move. And I think one of the things that we do with our clients is try to be that other voice that says, let's not just use the data to support the narrative that we've been talking about. Let's really use the data to drive more value out of the investments that you're making. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're always going to be, and again, we want to be in that line of fire. We want to be sitting there in front of the customer, being challenged on why it is we're doing the things we're doing. Because if we're not there, if we're not in that chair, then we're not bringing value to the client the way we need to.
Yeah. You've got to have one eye on what's happening now to make sure things, are running the way they are. They should be, but you've always got to have that one eye on the next step, right? Where do I want to go? Where do I want to go next? It's kind of like when you ski, right? You always have to look at, where do I want to be down the hill? And that's what you focus on. That's how you're going to get there without falling. So you have to have that laser focused future, and then figure out, how do I get from point A to point B and be successful?
But I also think, with regards to our clients, I think one of the reasons they've partnered with us in the first place is because they trust what we're going to put in or install from a program and strategy perspective. And I think at times they're looking for us to go and say what's right for that strategy, so that we can push back and say, I don't think that's actually right. And the reason is, we have a good reason for it. But to say, we think we know the makeup of what these programs look like,
right,
and what you're saying is a good idea, but that doesn't fit this.
Yeah.
And we actually think this is defined as whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yes, if you're aligning, business alignment, I think once you're into 2 years and you've tried a bunch of things, it's like, it may not be obvious to even the internal teams, because they need the digital, to your point, Kev, like the digital marketing experience and skill set. And there's a changing landscape, even in 2-3 years ago, some of the things that we were doing to drive demand, those features aren't even on the systems anymore, which we've talked about. Like there are literally lead gen tactics that are no longer available. So you couldn't just if you're an internal marketer that maybe doesn't focus on that, you might still be thinking, oh, that's a possibility for us. So there's that lens. And then the external agencies, they may not be probing enough for how, like, what is it about your business or this product that we could really unpack and find those areas of growth. And I was going to like say, just to build on your piece, guy, I was like, what do you do when a client says, oh, we think that this is the right, we want to do this, but we're disagreeing almost with that approach. Like, how do you go about that? Because I think that's a healthy, to your point, Chris, that's a healthy conversation to have. We don't necessarily fully understand the client's business, but there's that debate process.
It is healthy because I think the best ideas are ones that are contested and really pulled apart to see if they have merit. And I like the idea of everyone at the table being like fighting for, at the end of the day, not like fighting, but like really challenging for the best idea possible that the business will benefit from that. Mm-hmm. But I think what you have to do in our position as sort of the creators or developers of the strategies to lay out the whole strategy visually or as best we can, say, now does that fit in with the whole thing we're doing, rather than looking at it siloed and say, well, it fits for this week. Okay, great. But does that fit for the whole structure of the campaign or the mission we're trying to accomplish?
Well, that's that strategic view, right? So there's the
that's
bigger
what we would
picture.
Bring. And in some cases we're saying, actually, that's a great idea. That really fits in. I can see how, and we can bend and tweak and whatever. And in other cases we could say, but as the ones really guarding that strategy, it just doesn't quite fit. And that is our role.
So you're you're in a situation where you've been running programs for 2 years. You've hit a lot of great success. You've got a level of front end, inbound demand gen. You've got your customer marketing going. You've probably started to implement levels of loyalty, and you can do all these things as fast as you want. But in terms of that 2 year mark, feeling really good that you've got a good KPI dashboard. You can see these things in action. And now you're sitting down as a team saying, okay, where can we start to grow? We have existing product lines. So that's one area. So how do we then be thinking about this from a data and insights perspective, shifting gears? How do we look at the data and say, yeah, you know what, this is one thing we're going to go do. And try it.
And I think in most instances, when something is not working, you're going to go and look at the data insights. You're going to try and figure out what's not moving, what's not working. You do some test and learn. You do some fine tuning. You kind of right the ship. But what about things that are working, right? So that becomes a challenge because, well, if it's working, do I have to worry about it? No, my growth rate is fairly steady over the last 6 months. I don't have to worry about that. And I think that's the biggest danger, because the second you say that, you're taking your eyes off of it and you're not looking at constantly growing, and therefore you could be shrinking or backtracking.
Or to your point about danger, suppose that what's working is working pretty well. What if there's an even better, excellently well?
You're missing
whatever?
Opportunities. That's a very good point. Yeah.
So when you think of at a micro level, there's probably tons of examples within the data where you might say that type of campaign that we run, maybe it is getting a 20% click rate, or that would probably be very good. Should we be thinking about how to improve that? I think you have to almost break down every piece of the things that you're running and look at, to your point, is this optimal? Like, do we get to our 2 year mark, we're running really well and we're growing 30% year over year maybe, and that could be very good for some companies, and stop? Or do you look and first of all, pick apart the things that you have and say, yeah, you know what, let's try to tune this one by 5% and this one by 10% and this one by 40% as that piece. And then I want to switch gears and talk about the net new. How do we go out and bring net new kind of injection of whether it's traffic or audiences into the equation?
Oh, for me? Sorry, you're looking at me.
Your data and insights.
Well, I think they're sort of looking at from a couple of different ways. I think, most companies, and whether it's from an overall growth from a digital perspective, that 30% growth rate or open rate, it's never going to stay constant. It's just, you just have to realize that at some point it's going to change. And that forward-thinking companies are going to be looking at things that work, and they're going to find ways to test. They're going to test. They're going to disrupt. It might have a negative impact for a little bit, but you're also going to find ways to growth. And that's what you need to do. You constantly need to be testing the things that are working.
I guess to your point, though, human tendency would be, if you're looking to optimize, tweak, improve things, you would start with the things that are working the least well.
Absolutely.
Naturally, right?
You can
And
fix
you would
something
say,
that's broken first.
I don't really need to fix the best performing thing,
Yeah.
even if theoretically it could be better.
But I think what you're saying is also like it's probably another piece of it is that the digital landscape is changing very quickly, and some of the avenues that you might have said that's performing fairly well, in 6 months or a year may not. Like you might just,
Right.
You could very well be in a situation where our audiences is actually shifting, and we're seeing changes to where they're engaging, or our
Right.
content that we thought was great and worked really well a year ago in the format that we did, it's just not working the way it is today. So
Yeah.
that and it may not manifest itself as like a immediate red flag on the KPI report, but if you're not thinking about what's actually working,
Exactly.
But it could
Exactly.
be-
It's human nature. You're going to fix what's not working, and then we only have so much budget, so much time. So those things that are working, we might say, oh yeah, we should look into that. But very often that tends to fall off the list or low down
Sure.
on the priority.
But I
And
like I like where Mike's going. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
Because there's two different sort of avenues that could justify change. Like the one obvious one is more on the tactical side. Google changes an algorithm. Okay, all of a sudden it's just
Yep.
like you've really got to pivot quickly. But what if it's the other side of the equation? It's more like strategy based. So the message that worked last year for your offering was right on point this year. Things have just changed in your industry, your landscape, and then it's like, oh. So yeah, that was performing really well last year, but just all of a sudden something's happened. That doesn't work.
Totally
And
out
so
of your
then
control,
you just gotta chuck
right?
it out the window and start over.
So-
I agree.
point.
It's
So
always
to toss
changing.
this over to you, Chris, in terms of the executive in the room. Okay,
I just got a promotion.
just got a promotion.
Congrats.
Yeah, congrats.
Kev.
Yeah, you got a program. You've been looking at data. We've got a certain amount of performance. In your mind, when you're thinking about unpacking some of the clients, or just what you could anticipate, these conversations being like, what are you, in your ideal position, you would like to hear from your vendors? We're thinking of this relentless pursuit of results and almost not being tired. You're gonna really quickly see like internal teams kind of just get worn down. They're just too busy. They're not going to go that extra mile to split something out and do a quick test. What do you want from a vendor?
Like, I think you want somebody that's just wanting to improve things constantly. So having a regular strategic sort of session that is in place all the time. This is what our customers are asking of us. They're not sort of watching the returns come in and going, okay, that's all good. Everyone seems to be doing a great job. They're bringing us into their offices. They're sitting us down and we're talking about what's happening, as Robin was referring to, over the next 3 to 5 months. I'm expecting that if I was having a vendor come to me and sort of offer me some value, in the organization going forward, that we would be sitting down regularly, talking about, yes, what does the data tell us? What is happening in the marketplace that I'm involved in, and how am I going to be ready for that next quarter? How, like, I need that kind of investment from my vendor in order to continue to be ready for the for the future as it's coming.
And use the outside lens, right?
Yeah,
That
I was
outside
just about
lens.
to say, like, I can't think of any customer of ours who would say, we hired you because we thought you could get us, like, you could really execute 1 year really well with us. They hired us because they said, oh, you're smart. You can really ride a journey with us into this new foray of digital and all the things we want to do. So I
Right.
think maybe to add to your answer, I would be looking from a vendor or like an agency to be proactive about ideas, to have the different lens that you're talking about. Just we're not stifled in their industry thinking about their business only. We're getting exposed to all sorts of kinds of things, and we have this ability to, sometimes they're not great ideas because we just don't know the industry, but in other times we're coming up with things that are kind of out of the box, and it's like, well, hey, that'll have us in our company internally think about things a bit differently. I think that's a huge value, and they believe in how we think about things, which is why they partnered with us in the first place.
Well, they didn't hire us to, in generally speaking, just to execute something
For like a small period of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
they're hiring us because we're bringing these different sort of experiences, these different marketplaces to to the table. They're seeing the results early, and then they're seeing that ongoing commitment to that regular routine look at the strategy, tweaking, making changes, doubling down on some things, completely changing the approach on others, but also being that executive in the room as well. We're shoulder to shoulder. I know, Mike, you have most of your weeks are spent with CEOs of organizations talking about what the next 6 to 12 months are like.
Yeah, I think, so at a micro level in the agency, you have to put in this same sort of culture around, it might just be a 5% uptick on an open rate of, 700 campaigns that you're running in a year, but that actually could make a difference. And you want us to be thinking about that. And I think that's where you're right. We're being asked to do that. And that's what it takes. I mean, you need to really ingrain that into the thinking so that it's your point, Robin, things are changing. I mean, you can't sit on this open rate for a year. You can't assume that it's going to necessarily, now that doesn't mean wholesale changes, but the testing that you might do to see how it's going, or that relentless pursuit, that energy to go back and say, let's just go revisit this. We could leave it. We could leave it for 6 months.
No, we need to set the tone differently. We need to set the tone like that. I think one of the things that, we were somewhat sort of conditioned to do, customer is always right, yes sir, no sir, we're going to, do as asked. But that's not what today's customer is looking for from an agency. They're looking for somebody to push, to press, to drive, and to be relentless and to be obsessive about the results that they're getting. And so, if we are not that, then somebody else is going to be.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that was pretty good. Alex, what are we at for time-wise?
23.
23. That's always a beautiful length.
Good number.
That's a beautiful
We want to focus more on the length, not so much the quality of the content or the quantity.
Good quality. I think
It's
Well,
a
I'm going
quality.
to push
I
back
think
and
quality
say,
is
I think we can do
pretty
both.
We can do both. Yeah.
We can. Yeah.
Not for free, but we can do both.
We'll look at the metrics and say,
which
tune
one's
out at 24 minutes.
Yeah. We're hyper metrics oriented on our podcast. We know exactly when people drop off, which is at the 25-minute mark. So we're going to shut.
So we're going to speak quickly. Don't leave us.
All right. I think we're good. So the message is loud and clear. That you need to be thinking performance when you get to. I mean, you always need to be, but expect that when you're up and running and things are firing on cylinders, that you're going to have to really have that mindset and the right type of partner and internal thinking as well to be pursuing and driving results.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.